So we have yet another edition of Confused Americans in Europe, otherwise known as American living vicariously through other Americans as they travel through Europe. So without further ado, let's get into this first video. Why are Brits so mean? And by the way, before we watch this video, just know that the views expressed throughout these TikToks that we're reacting to have nothing to do with the views that I myself hold. So, quick little disclaimer.
On in England. I came here thinking it was gonna be a lovely community friendly vibes because that's what they give off, and then I come to this place. Do you know what happens on the first day? I was walking down the street and this guy comes up to me and he goes, "You're pretty for a redhead, darling."
wait, hold on. "You're pretty for a redhead, darling" is crazy, I'm not gonna lie. That's a crazy pickup line.
And I say, "Sir, what do you mean by that?" Because no one in America would say that because everyone is kind and loving in America.
I don't know where she got that idea from, but I have definitely seen men use crazier pickup lines than that in the US, and I am not proud to admit that I am one of those men who have used crazier pickup lines, albeit for content purposes, but I've also seen people in my day-to-day life use crazier pickup lines than that. So I don't know where she's from. Maybe she's from the middle of nowhere. But what she's saying is most certainly false.
And he goes, "Well, you know, gingers are ugly." He walks away.
Wait. I haven't heard anyone say that to a girl before. That's kind of crazy. But I am inclined to believe that most British people are not like that guy. That's just my personal assumption. I could be wrong about that. Let me know in the comments if you've had an experience similar to this with a British person before.
You had just delivered the most horrible compliment. Backhanded compliment, might I add, to me? And you think that's meant to be a compliment? You have just offended my community. You have just offended my whole heart. You do not understand the gravity of what you just said to me. And I'm never coming back to England again. Why are y'all so mean?
Okay, so this kind of reminds me of that video that I reacted to recently where the girl was in France and she was struggling to make friends, struggling to kind of adapt to the culture, albeit she was only there for, I think, a week or something like that. But she was having a lot of issues socially. And I think the issue here is that Americans are not really accustomed to how Europeans communicate. Now, again, I think the British guy that she came across was an anomaly because I've been to England for all of, 48 hours, if that, and I personally did not come across anybody moving like that. But I also lived in the Netherlands for 14 months straight, and that's a culture that is known for being incredibly direct. And I also did not come across anybody who was talking like that. Personally. Not saying it doesn't happen, but I never came across that. So I think that for Americans, they're not really used to that direct form of communication that you see in a lot of Western European societies. Because in the US, a lot of people, they may call you pretty to your face, but then they'll talk badly about you behind your back. And that is a real, raw reality that I'm sure any American can validate for themselves. On to the next video. And this one is muted for copyright purposes, but more culture shocks I had when I moved to Spain from the US. So let's see what she has to say. "I'm ready to go to the store whenever you are. Are you going running first?" "No. I'll go get changed real quick." Okay, so the athleisure thing. That is definitely something that I wouldn't even necessarily call that a culture shock for Americans in Europe. I would say that's more of a culture shock for Europeans when they see Americans in Europe, or Europeans when they go to the USA. Because in the US, I feel like people don't really take fashion into account nearly as much because Americans spend so much time in their cars. So, of course, if you're gonna be out in the public eye for all of 15 minutes, then it may not be worth spending 15 minutes to put together a good outfit. But I will say, for me personally, that is a habit that I still have, wearing athleisure. I mean, as I film this video, I'm basically wearing glorified pajamas. And the reason why is because I go to the gym pretty much every day. So after I finish filming these videos today, I'm going to the gym. So it's practical. It's for practicality's sake. In Europe, people tend to dress to the nines because, again, they're out and about. And when you know you're going to be seen in public, you tend to take that little bit of extra time to put that extra bit of effort toward your appearance. It's just natural. And you also see this in New York City, for example, which is the most walkable city in the US by a substantial margin, that is the epicenter of fashion in the US. Also, interestingly enough, its fashion is heavily influenced by European fashion trends. 9:55 a.m. Hey, I gotta get going. I have a meeting at 10 a.m. I'll call you later. Yeah. So this right here, I think this is a great example of how the cultures, even within Europe, can vary drastically. So my girlfriend, she's born and raised in the Netherlands, and she did her internship in Spain, Valencia, Spain to be exact. And this was something that she had to get used to as well, was the lack of punctuality, because the culture is generally much more relaxed. And I'm sure that if you're Spanish or Dutch or German, for that matter, you can attest to that difference. I thought we were meeting at 10 a.m. Oh no, you're right, we said 10 a.m. Oh. You know what? It's so interesting because I don't think this is a Spain-specific thing. I think this has more to do with countries that speak romantic languages, or are they romance languages? Let me know in the comments. I always get those mixed up. But basically, France, Spain, Portugal, and most of South America, I think, is a lot less punctual and a lot more loose with scheduling. Whereas the countries that are more Germanic in their languages, I don't even know if I said Germanic correctly, but you know what I'm talking about. English-speaking countries, Dutch-speaking, you have, of course, German-speaking, like Switzerland, Germany, so on and so forth. They're a lot more rigid with their schedule. And I will say I'm kind of in the middle on that. When it comes to meeting with my friends, we're pretty much always late. If we say we're going to talk at, let's say, for example, 10 o'clock on the phone, we're probably going to talk at around 10:30. And I kind of just came to accept that throughout the years. But when it comes to appointments, for example, official appointments or meetings or anything pertaining to business or official stuff, not leisure stuff, but official stuff, I want everything to be punctual. Let me know in the comments where on that spectrum you fall. Great, I'll check you in. I'm not seeing you. Are you sure it's for today? That's odd. You gave me a card for 7/8 and today is July 8th. Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, so you're about a month early. 7/8 is actually August 7th. We put the month second and the day first. I feel like that's something that you should know coming in. You should probably know that coming in. But I can see how if you're not really thinking clearly, then that would catch you off guard. But over time, I've come to realize that it makes more sense to put the day first before the month because you're going by the smallest unit of time first. So day, month, year, rather than month, day, year. And it's a pretty inconsequential difference. It doesn't make that big of a difference in day-to-day life, but I feel like there are a lot of seemingly small things that Europe does a lot better than the US that Americans just don't realize until they go to Europe. On to the next video.
I've been getting a lot of hate comments on my previous video calling me lazy American and many other interesting things, but I want to be transparent and mention that I come from a very, very car-centric city in the US, where the closest grocery store is about a 15-minute walk. So I've never used a bus.
Let me see.
A 15
A 15-minute walk. I feel like that's not that bad. Oh, no, not 15 minutes, 51 minutes. Yeah, that's a very, very big difference right there. 51 minutes. At least they have public transit in the city that he's from. Because in the city that I come from, there is no public transit. There is no 35 minutes to take the bus to the grocery store. Granted, I lived a lot closer to grocery stores, but my point still stands that public transit was non-existent. Longmont, I don't know exactly where that is, but it looked like it was in the western US, which tracks because the western US is pretty much all of the worst stereotypes you can think of in regards to that urban sprawl times 10. Cities like Phoenix, LA, where else? Denver, so on and so forth. Just abysmal public transit and walkability.
walk. So I've never used a bus or train in my entire life. I guess I'm wrong here and I shouldn't have judged beforehand. So I'll be listening to you guys today and rating my experience using public transport in Poland out of 5 stars with the help of my girlfriend. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first time in my life commuting by metro, so I was very excited. I felt like I was on a school field trip.
I definitely resonate with that. The first time I used public transit was actually in New York City. But even when I used the train in, let's say, for example, Switzerland, I think it was Zurich, Switzerland, where I used public transit in Europe for the first time. I couldn't even figure out how to pay, so I ended up getting on the train without paying. And I'm kind of afraid to go back to Switzerland because I'm afraid they have me on camera or something. But I literally didn't even know how to pay. Because in New York, it was so straightforward where you can't get into the station without paying first. But obviously in Zurich, it's not like that, which is fascinating to me because that lets me know, without even knowing anything else about Swiss culture, that it is a very high trust society. Because believe me when I tell you that that would not work in New York City. If they don't have those barriers in place, everyone is getting on that train for free 99.
Immediately, I was shocked at how clean the metro stations are here. It's truly something unbelievable.
Yes, that is definitely something that Americans don't understand about European public transit. It's because when Americans think about public transit, they think about that girl from the Ukraine who was just randomly killed on the train in Charlotte, North Carolina. I think it was in Charlotte, North Carolina. Just randomly for no reason. If you know what I'm talking about, then you probably understand why Americans are very hesitant to get on public transit, let alone all of the things that you'll see on the train on a day-to-day basis where you just don't want to be there. I mean, outside of New York, and New York can get sketchy as well, outside of New York, like LA, for example, the public transit out there, you don't want to be on there. It's gangbangers, it's homeless people, and it's not even the fact that they're homeless, it's the fact that they're homeless and crazy. Whether they're high or mentally ill, whatever it is, you feel very threatened. That was something that really blew my mind about European public transit, is that it's actually a very pleasant experience.
Have you seen the videos of how dirty New York subways are? Poland definitely gets a star for this one. As for the metro car, it was also super clean and modern, nothing like what you see in New York City or Chicago. I'll give Poland another star for that one. Eventually, we made it to Stadium Narodowy, where we got out of the metro, walked for a few minutes to the tram station, which we missed the first one. I thought we would be waiting for about 15 more minutes, but eventually another one came very, very quickly, like in less than 5 minutes.
So one thing I've heard is that Swiss public transit particularly is very, very punctual, whereas some other countries are a little less punctual. In my experience with riding the Dutch public transit, they were usually fairly punctual, maybe within around a 5-ish minute margin for error, which for me personally was never a big issue because I always just tried to leave early enough that that wouldn't be an issue. But let me know how it is in your country, because I know that some countries it tends to vary. So for example, in Spain, if culturally people place a lot less emphasis on punctuality, does that also extend to the public transit? Because again, that is where I draw the line. If I'm waiting 20 minutes and that train is still not there, I am catching an Uber.
Another star to Poland for that one. The tram itself was very clean and modern and had these cool things to hold on to. Another star for Poland on that one. We finally got off the tram and walked for about 5 minutes to our apartment, which wasn't super long. It feels longer since I've only driven it, but now that I walk it, it's actually much faster. And finally, guys, I give this whole system a 5 out of 5 for...
It's interesting that he pointed out it feels faster when you walk, and I don't know how it is in other European countries. I have to assume it's pretty similar, but I know in the Netherlands, oftentimes driving is actually the slowest way to get somewhere. Or at the very least, it will take you the same amount of time as if you had just rode your bike. And the reason why is because, and Americans won't understand this because in the US, everything is designed for the car, first and foremost, especially the further west and the further south you go. So it's unfathomable to an American that you can get to a grocery store or get wherever else faster by using public transit and cycling and or walking than by driving. But in the Netherlands, oftentimes if you look at the route from point A to point B on Google Maps, for example, you'll see that the bike route will take you on a very direct path. You'll just go in a straight line or maybe take a slight turn here and then you're back on a straight line and that's it. Whereas with the car, you have to go all the way around everything to get to that same place. And so it ends up taking you the same amount of time because cars travel faster, but you're covering a much larger distance. So that's something that is, again, pretty incomprehensible to many, many Americans. And I really hope that within my lifetime, I will be able to see some of that turn around and I'll be able to see the US begin to implement some of that into their urban planning structure. Because I truly believe that that's one of the biggest levers that makes life in Europe more sustainable and more enjoyable than life in the USA.